Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into part 2 of our series, and we're discussing using the work of an auditor's expert under SLAuS 620. That's the Sri Lanka auditing standard which guides auditors when they use the work of a specialist or expert in their audit process. Now, let's get straight into it. So, who exactly is a management's expert? Well, a management's expert is an individual or an organization that has specialist knowledge in a field other than accounting or auditing. Their expertise is used by management to assist in preparing the financial statements. These are not people brought in for the auditor's purposes. They work for management, and their findings or reports are primarily used by the entity itself. Let me make this clearer with an example. Imagine a company needs to value a large piece of land it owns. The accountant or auditor may not have the technical expertise to do that. So, a surveyor, who is an expert in property valuation, is hired by management. That person becomes a management's expert. Some of the most common management experts used by companies include actuaries, who calculate pension scheme liabilities under defined benefit plans, surveyors, who estimate the fair value of properties, professional stocktakers, who physically count and value inventory, and language experts, who help translate financial statements from overseas branches and subsidiaries, especially useful when consolidating global accounts. Why does an auditor use an expert? Sometimes, during an audit, the auditor may need to obtain audit evidence in areas that require specialized knowledge or expertise, which the auditor does not personally possess. This is where an auditor's expert comes in, someone like a valuer, actuary, engineer, or legal professional. Their work helps the auditor gather sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. But here's the key point, and it comes directly from SLAuS 620. The auditor has sole responsibility for the audit opinion expressed, and that responsibility is not reduced by the use of the work of an auditor's expert. Let me repeat that. The auditor remains fully responsible for the audit opinion. Even if the expert performs high-quality work, the auditor cannot shift the responsibility onto the expert. Yes, the auditor can accept the findings or conclusions of the expert as appropriate audit evidence, but only after evaluating the expert's competence, objectivity, and the quality of their work. So, just because an expert is used, it does not mean the auditor's job is done. The auditor must carefully review and understand the expert's report, ensure the work aligns with the audit objectives, and document the procedures and conclusions reached. In simple terms, the auditor can use the expert's help, but cannot pass the blame if something goes wrong. The audit opinion is the auditor's responsibility, always. When should an auditor use an expert? According to SLAuS 620, if expertise in a field other than accounting or auditing is necessary to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, then the auditor must determine whether to use the work of an expert. So it's all about one key principle: getting enough reliable evidence in areas the auditor is not qualified to handle alone. Let me give you some examples of where this might happen. Areas requiring specialist expertise. Valuation of complex items, like financial instruments, land and buildings, plant and machinery, jewelry, artwork, antiques. Intangible assets like trademarks or goodwill. Assets and liabilities from mergers or business combinations. Impaired assets that may need a revaluation. Actuarial calculations, such as insurance contract liabilities. Employee benefit plans and pensions. Estimation of reserves in industries like oil and gas. Environmental liabilities, including cleanup costs, legal obligations under environmental law, legal and regulatory interpretation, especially complex contracts, industry-specific compliance, complicated tax matters, like unusual tax positions, cross-border tax compliance. As you can see, these are highly technical areas. The auditor might not have the necessary training to understand or evaluate them fully. That's why the standard gives the auditor the responsibility to assess whether expert help is needed, and if so, to engage a competent and objective expert. But remember, And I've said this in video. Even if the auditor uses an expert, the final audit opinion is still the auditor's responsibility. Key considerations for using an auditor's expert. According to SLAuS 620, the auditor must use their professional judgment to determine if an expert is needed. And there are 5 key considerations they should keep in mind. 1. Whether management has used a management's expert. If management has already relied on a specialist, for example, a surveyor to value land, the auditor may also need expert input to assess whether that valuation is fair and reasonable. 2. The nature and significance of the matter, including its complexity. The more complex and significant the matter is, for example, valuing intangible assets in a business combination, the more likely an expert is needed to support the audit evidence. 3. The risk of material misstatement. If there's a high risk that something could go wrong in a specific area, such as incorrect estimation of liabilities, the auditor may need an expert to ensure reliable conclusions. 4. The auditor's knowledge and past experience. If the auditor has experience and technical knowledge in that area, they may not need an expert. But if the matter is outside their comfort zone, it's better to bring in a specialist. 5. Availability of other sources of audit evidence. If audit evidence can be obtained through other reliable means, the auditor might avoid using an expert. But if no alternative sources are available, involving an expert becomes necessary. So remember, the decision to use an auditor's expert is not automatic. It depends on how complex the issue is, what management has done, what risks are involved, what knowledge the auditor already has, and whether other audit evidence is available. This decision is critical for ensuring that the auditor's opinion is based on solid, professional, and verifiable evidence. I'll see you in the next video, which will be the final video on SLAuS 620. Stay tuned and stay smart. Thank you for watching.